The longer you hold the skull, the more you score.
Ball incoming.
Halo Infinite multiplayer beta launched with several game modes, with Oddball being one of them. The idea of Oddball is essentially hot potato. Except you need to keep this hot potato for the longest time rather than just throwing it away. That doesn't mean that you should never drop the ball. More on that later. When a teammate, or even you, possess the ball, your location will be marked and visible to the enemy as an icon. This means that the enemy will always be just around the corner, ready to attack, and they'll have the advantage in knowing exactly where you are. Another reason why a teammate in possession of the Oddball is vulnerable is the fact that they won't be able to use their weapons while holding it, and they'll suffer a speed debuff as long as they're holding it. Games of Oddball will almost certainly be a chaotic mess, with both teams mindlessly pursuing the ball in their frenzy. You'll need to be a lot more organised if you want to maintain control of the ball or snatch it back from a competent opposing team. As with most of the game modes, the longer you stay alive, the more chance you have of winning. The best way to ensure you stay alive for the longest time is to stick with your teammates. This is particularly important during the Oddball game, since one of your teammates will, ideally, have possession of the ball and will therefore be vulnerable. When you're in possession of the ball, you actually inflict more damage with a melee attack, and the cooldown between the next melee attack can be executed will be reduced. This makes you surprisingly effective in melee combat if you're overwhelmed by a couple of enemies. Power items such as drop walls and repulsors have an obvious utility here, allowing you to repel the enemy in strategic ways at critical stages of the fight. If you're defending in a tight spot, with your team, dropping a shield with the wall drop will help you repel some of the fire incoming, especially from range. You'll need to keep in mind though the enemy can run past the shield if they get too close. So a plan B is necessary. The repulsor is particularly useful here, especially if the enemy launch numerous grenades at your defensive position. At the same time, if you time it right, a well-timed use of the repulsor can send all the grenades flying back towards the enemy team. Now, because the ball carrier can only melee, dropping the ball allows for an extra gun to be available to repel an offensive. Otherwise, the alternative is to hold on to the ball and watch as the enemy rush your allies and overwhelm them and you, which invites certain defeats. It's better to help your allies defeat the offensive with a certain chance of retaining the ball at the end, with the only exception to dropping the ball is when you're being attacked by multiple enemies and there's only a few seconds left before the timer hits 100 seconds. At this point you can risk holding out for the last 10 seconds or so, knowing that you'll be certain to die if you had to wait any longer. If nothing else, you're holding the ball and increasing that timer, which will make it easier for an ally to come along and hold the ball to finish off the match. The result is a crazed hunt for anyone who has the ball on the opposing side, and you need a strong defense of whoever has it on your team. The more powerful your weapons and equipment, the better chance you have of consistently defeating the enemy. The ball starts at a predetermined location and will respawn if the ball goes out of bounds, or isn't held for a long period of time. The objective to win is simple. Your team must hold the ball collectively for 100 seconds before the other team does. This means that whenever a teammate is holding onto the ball, the timer will increase by 1 for each second that they're holding the ball. The time will stop as soon as the ball is dropped, but it will start up where it left off when the next time a team member picks it up. In a scenario where you're almost certain to die anyway, you aren't losing anything by holding onto the ball and potentially taking out an enemy or two with the ball's melee capabilities.